All right, so in today's lesson, we're going to be looking at complex numbers. And complex numbers, when we're talking about complex numbers, we're talking about numbers that have a real part and an imaginary part. So our objective today is to be able to add, subtract, and multiply imaginary expressions. And our essential question is, how does the letter I act like a variable? Okay, so again, today we're just going to be focusing on just complex numbers, okay? In the last lesson, we looked at what imaginary solutions look like. Today, we're only going to be dealing with looking at numbers that have two parts. So, complex numbers, guys, are numbers that have a real part and an imaginary part. Okay, so complex numbers are numbers that have a real part and an imaginary part. So, in this case, example, we have 3 plus 4i. Well, it turns out that 3 is our real part and 4i is our imaginary part. Now, why is 4i our imaginary part? Well, because we have this I here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and label that. So the 3, so this right here is the real part. And then this part over here is our imaginary part. All right, let's look at our next example. So again, we got 2 minus 6i. So again, 2 is our real part, minus 6i is our imaginary part. And again, it's because of that I. So this is our real part. And this over here is the imaginary part. All right, moving forward. So we're going to start by adding complex numbers. Now, how do we add a complex number? And the way we're going to do that is to add the like terms only. Okay, so all we're going to do to add complex numbers is to add the like terms. So, example, when we have 2 plus 3i plus 6 minus 5i. Now, technically, in front of these numbers, there's a 1. Okay, now 1 times any number is going to be the same thing back. So we got 2 plus 3i plus, we also have this 1. Okay, and 1 times 6 minus 5i is also 6 minus 5i. Okay, so we got 2 plus 3i plus 6 minus 5i. And what we're interested in doing is combining our like terms. So we got 2 plus 6. We're going to put those together. 2 plus 6 is 8. Okay, because those are our like terms. And then the imaginary parts are like terms. So these two to go together. So 3i minus 5i is going to be negative 2i. Okay? And 8 minus 2i, that's as far as I can go. So that would be my solution. Okay, we got our real part. We got our real part. And then we have our imaginary part over here. All right. Let's look at the next example. We got in parentheses negative 9 minus 7i plus in parentheses 6 plus 5i. Okay, so again, we have an imaginary 1 in front of the parentheses. And all we have to do is distribute. Okay, so 1 times negative 9, we have negative 9. 1 times negative 7i is negative 7i. Plus, then we have 1 times 6 times 1 plus 5i. So we got 1 times 6 is 6, plus 1 times 5i is 5i. Now let's combine our like terms. So we got negative 9 plus 6. Negative 9 plus 6, when I put those together, it gives me negative 3. So negative 9 plus 6 is negative 3. And then we have negative 7i plus 5i is going to be negative 2i. Okay, and that's as far as we can go. All right, so again, we have our real part, and then we have our imaginary part. All right, so let's try this one here. And I want you to try it, so just pause the video, write this down, try it out. I will go through it, but again, pause it, try it, and then check your solution. All right, so again, remember we have this invisible 1 in front. I'm going to go ahead and distribute. Okay, distribute that 1. So we have 1 times 1 is 1, plus 1 times 2i is 2i, plus 1 times 7 is 7, 1 times a negative 4i is minus 4i. All right, our like terms, we got 1 plus 7. Okay, 1 plus 7 is 8. And then we have 2i minus 4i gives us minus 2i. All right, so subtracting complex numbers, it works the same way, guys. So again, we got this 1 here, and we have a minus 1 over here. So we're going to go ahead and distribute. 1 times 4 and 1 times 5i. Well, 1 times 4 is 4, plus 1 times 5i is 5i. Okay, now on the right-hand side, we're going to go ahead and distribute the negative 1. So we got negative 1 times 14, and negative 1 times I, and technically there's like a negative 1i here. So negative 1 times 14 gives us a negative 14. And negative 1 times negative 1i gives us a positive 1i. All right, so we're going to go ahead and combine our like terms. We got 4 minus 14 gives us negative 10. And then we have 5i plus 1i gives us positive 6i. And there's our solution to this problem. Okay, the next example we got in parentheses, we got 5 plus 2i, close parentheses, minus 5 minus 2i. So again, we have these 1s in front. So we're going to go ahead and distribute 1 times 5, 1 times 2i. So 1 times 5 is 5, plus 1 times 2i is 2i. All right, so then we're going to take negative 1 times 5 and negative 1 times a minus 2i. So negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. Negative 1 times negative 2i gives us a positive 2i. And now all we have to do is combine our like terms. So we got 5 minus 5 gives us 0. And then we have 2i plus 2i gives us plus 4i. Okay? And 0 plus 4i is equal to just 4i. All right, so I want you to try this. So pause the video, try it out. All right, so there's a 1 front and there's a 1 in front. 1 times 4 and 1 times 3i. So 1 times 4 gives us 4, plus 1 times 3i is 3i. And then we have minus 1 times 7. And then we have minus 1 times negative 5. So negative 1 times 7 is negative 7. Negative 1 times negative 5 is a positive 5i, right? Remember, because a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay, so now we're going to combine our like terms. So we got 4 minus 7 gives us a negative 3. And then we have 3i plus 5i gives us positive 8i. And that's as far as we can go. Again, make sure to check your solution. All right. So, hold on 1 second. All right, so the last thing we're going to do is multiply complex numbers, okay? And the way that we multiply is by distributing. Now, one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is that, so just as a side note so that we remember that I is equal to the square root of negative 1, and that I squared is equal to negative 1, okay? So these two things is what's important, what you need to know in this multiplication. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and multiply this out. So we have 3 plus 5i, and then 3 plus 5i. okay? So remember, what we're going to do here is I'm going to multiply this 3 times everything over here. So we got 3 multiplied by the second set of parentheses, okay? And then we're also going to multiply this 5i times the entire thing there. So plus 5i multiplied by the other part. So 3 plus 5i. All right. So now we're going to go ahead and distribute. Okay, so 3 times 3 and 3 times 5i. So 3 times 3 is 9 plus 3 times 5i is 59. Okay, so that's how this simplifies. All right. Plus, we're going to distribute this 5i to the 3 and 5i times 5i. So 5i times 3 is 59 plus 5i times 5i is 25i squared. Okay, so one thing we want to keep in mind here. So let's combine our like terms. Well, let's leave it how it is. So we got 9 plus 15i plus 15i plus 25. Now remember, this I squared is equal to -1, right? This is what we said before. So I'm going to replace this I squared with -1. So what do we have? We have 9 plus 15i plus 15i plus 25 times -1 is -25. All right, so let's combine our like terms. So we got 9 minus 25 is equal to -16. Okay, so -16. And then we have plus 15i and 15. Let's do this with a different color. Okay, so these are like terms. 15i plus 15i. I'm going to put those together, and that gives me 30i. So our final solution would be -16 plus 30i. All right, so let's try one more. Okay, so let's say that I give you, so this is our last example. Let's say I give you 2 minus 3i multiplied by 4, and let's say plus 7i. Okay, so again, we're going to go ahead and distribute this. So we're going to say 2 times that entire thing and then 3 times that entire thing. So we got 2 multiplied by 4 plus 7i. Okay, then we have minus 3i, which is also going to be multiplied by 4 plus 7i. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and distribute this. So we got 2 times 4 and 2 times 7i. So 2 times 4 is 8 plus 2 times 7i is 14i. And then we have, we're going to multiply -3i times 4 and -3i times 7i. So we got -12i minus -3i times 7i is the same thing as 27i squared. Okay, so let's clean this up a bit. So this, we get 8 plus 14i minus 12i minus 21. And remember that this I squared is equal to -1. Okay, I squared is equal to -1. So this simplifies to 8 plus 14 minus 12i. And -21 times -1 is a positive 21, right? A negative times a negative is a positive. And let's combine our like terms. So we got equals 8 and 21. When I put those together, 8 plus 21 is 29. And then plus, this has an I. 14i minus 12i gives me a positive 2i. Okay, so that would be our final result, 29 plus 2i. All right, and that is it for today's notes. Make sure that you do practice these problems that have been assigned on Google Classroom.